Tonight, we return to the enchanting world of Narnia, but this time through the eyes of a lost queen. Once a gentle ruler of Narnia, Susan Pevensie had turned away from her magical past, dismissing it as a mere childhood fantasy. Yet, as she drifts into a quiet, reflective night, the pull of Narnia calls her back with a whisper. In this journey of redemption, Susan is thrust into the heart of Narnia once more, where she must confront an ancient darkness stirring beneath the land. Alongside familiar and new allies, she embarks on a quest to rediscover her strength, her courage, and the magic she left behind. Join us as we follow Susan's path of self-discovery, courage, and redemption in a land where peace and wonder are just a step away from mystery and shadow. Before we dive into the story, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? Let's see where all our fellow listeners are tuning in from. And if you found this story interesting, please show your support with a like and subscribe. The sky outside was grey, soft with the dim light of a London afternoon, and Susan Pevensie sat quietly by the window, lost in thought. It had been years since she had last spoken of Narnia, even longer since she had felt the tug of the magical world. Her siblings, Lucy, Edmund, and Peter, were gone now, lost in a tragic accident that still left an ache deep in her chest. Even now, after so much time had passed, she could feel the emptiness, a space where her family had once been, where Narnia had once been. But that was all in the past, she reminded herself. Narnia had been a dream, a childhood fantasy that she had outgrown. Or at least, that's what she had convinced herself for so long. She had immersed herself in the world of adulthood, parties, social circles, and the life expected of a woman in London. Yet, no matter how much she tried to fill her days, something was missing. There was a hollowness, a gnawing sense that she had lost something precious, something irreplaceable. As Susan stared out of the window at the busy streets, she felt an unfamiliar pull, a soft whisper deep within her. It was a whisper she had not heard in years, the quiet beckoning of Narnia, the magical land she had once ruled alongside her siblings. But that was impossible. Narnia was gone, closed off to her forever. Or so she had been told. Yet the feeling lingered. Later that evening, as Susan prepared for bed, she felt the weight of the past pressing in on her. She longed for the days when life had been filled with magic and adventure, when the burdens of the world were simpler, lighter. There was a sadness that never left her, a regret that shadowed her steps. She had denied Narnia, turned her back on the memories, and now she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. With a sigh, Susan lay down, the soft rustling of her bed sheets the only sound in the quiet room. As her eyes closed, she tried to push the thoughts of Narnia away. But in the stillness of the night, the pull grew stronger. It wasn't long before she fell into a deep sleep, and as she drifted, the world around her shifted. Susan's dreams were filled with familiar images, fields of green, vast forests, and the distant sound of waves crashing against the shores of Cair Paravel. Her heart beat faster as these memories, long buried, rose to the surface. She saw the faces of her siblings, heard their laughter, and felt the warmth of the Narnian sun on her skin. But when she opened her eyes, the dream was not over. Susan gasped, sitting upright. She was no longer in her room in London. Instead, she found herself in a forest, the trees tall and ancient, their leaves rustling gently in the cool breeze. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of earth and pine, and there was a familiar magic to the place that tugged at her heart. "Narnia," she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. She stood slowly, her mind racing. How was this possible? How could she have returned after all these years? The last time she had been in Narnia, Aslan had told her and Peter that they would not come back, that their time in Narnia was over. But here she was. Susan took a deep breath, steadying herself. She was dressed in simple traveling clothes, not unlike the ones she had worn during her time as Queen of Narnia. Her hand instinctively moved to her side, where she found a quiver of arrows and a bow slung over her shoulder. It felt right. As she began to walk, the familiar sights and sounds of Narnia flooded her senses. Birds called from the treetops, and the sunlight filtered through the leaves in a soft golden glow. The forest seemed alive, as if it were welcoming her back, though there was a strange undercurrent in the air, something that unsettled her. Susan hadn't gone far when she heard a rustling nearby. She froze, her hand moving to the ball on her back. The rustling grew louder, and then from behind a tree a figure emerged. Susan's breath caught in her throat. It was a fawn, tall and graceful, with dark curling horns and soft brown fur. His eyes, wide with surprise, locked onto Susan's, and for a moment neither of them spoke. You are Queen Susan," the fawn said, his voice trembling with awe. "You have returned." Susan's heart fluttered. She hadn't been called Queen Susan in so long, and the words felt both foreign and familiar. I didn't think it was possible," she admitted, lowering her hand from her bow. "But yes, it seems I have returned." The fawn stepped closer, his expression filled with a mixture of wonder and urgency. "The land is in need of you, Queen Susan. Narnia is in danger." Susan felt a cold chill crawl down her spine at the fawn's words. Narnia was in danger. Again. It seemed that every time she or her siblings were called to this magical land, there was some great threat looming on the horizon. "What kind of danger?" Susan asked, her voice steady, though her heart raced with concern. The fawn's expression grew somber. "An ancient evil is awakening," he said, his voice low. "It is stirring from deep within the earth, and already the creatures of the land can feel its presence. The trees have been whispering of shadows that move beneath the soil, of darkness that seeps into the hearts of the creatures. The animals are restless, and the stars." He hesitated, his gaze lifting towards the sky. "The stars have fallen silent." Susan's brow furrowed. "Silent? What does that mean?" The fawn shook his head. "The stars in Narnia have always been guides. They sing to those who listen, offering wisdom and light. But now, they are quiet, as if they are waiting for something terrible to come." Susan's mind raced. The last time she had been in Narnia, they had faced countless challenges, witches, battles, betrayals. But this felt different. This felt deeper, more insidious. "I don't understand," she said, her voice soft. "Why me? Why now? I haven't been here in so long. And She trailed off, her insecurities bubbling to the surface. Could she really face another great evil after all this time? The fawn stepped closer, his eyes filled with quiet strength. "Because Queen Susan Narnia remembers you. The land itself has called you back. You may have doubted your place here, but Narnia has not." Susan swallowed hard, her heart heavy with emotion. She had spent so many years pushing Narnia out of her mind, convincing herself that it was nothing more than a dream, a story from her childhood. But now, standing here in the heart of the forest, she couldn't deny the truth. Narnia was real, and it needed her. "Where do we begin?" she asked, her voice stronger now, more certain. The fawn smiled, relief flooding his features. "We must go to Caer Paravel. The other creatures of the land are gathering there. They are waiting for their queen." Susan nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She had been Queen Susan the Gentle once before, and though years had passed, the strength of that title still lingered within her. "Lead the way," she said, her heart resolute. The journey to Caer Paravel was long and quiet, the forest around them filled with an eerie stillness. The fawn led the way, his movements graceful and sure, while Susan followed, her thoughts swirling like the wind through the trees. As they walked, memories of her time in Narnia came rushing back. Memories of her siblings, of battles fought and won, of the joy and peace that had once filled this land. But alongside those memories came the regret, the shame of having turned her back on Narnia, of having lost her faith in something so beautiful. Now, as she walked through these familiar woods, Susan wondered if she could truly be the Queen Narnia needed. She had changed so much since her time here. Would the creatures of Narnia even remember her? And more importantly, could she still be the strong, gentle queen she had once been? The trees thinned, and in the distance, Susan saw the gleaming towers of Cair Paravel, the great castle that had once been her home. The sight of it took her breath away, stirring something deep within her. This was the place where she had ruled alongside her siblings, the place where they had been crowned kings and queens of Narnia. But now, as she approached, the castle seemed different. The air around it was thick with tension, and the creatures gathered at its gates were not celebrating, as they had once done when the Pevensies had ruled. Instead, they looked worried, their eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. Susan's heart clenched as she stepped forward. The creatures of Narnia, fauns, centaurs, talking animals, and dwarfs turned to face her, their expressions shifting from confusion to recognition. "It's her," one of them whispered. "Queen Susan." There was a murmur that rippled through the crowd, and slowly the creatures parted to allow Susan to pass. She felt their eyes on her, filled with a mixture of hope and doubt. They were looking to her for answers, for leadership, but could she truly give them what they needed? As Susan reached the entrance of Cair Paravel, a familiar figure emerged from the castle. It was Trumpkin, the loyal dwarf who had once fought alongside her and her siblings. "Queen Susan," Trumpkin said, his voice gruff but warm. "You've returned." Susan smiled, a wave of relief washing over her at the sight of an old friend. "It seems I have," she said softly. Trumpkin's expression grew serious. "We've been waiting for you. Narnia has been troubled. The land senses the darkness, and the creatures are afraid. We need your help." Susan nodded, her resolve hardening. "Tell me everything," she said. Inside Cair Paravel, Susan and Trumpkin sat by the fire, the warmth of the flames doing little to ease the cold that had settled in Susan's chest. Trumpkin explained everything that had happened since Susan's departure, the peaceful years that had followed her reign, and then the slow creeping unease that had begun to spread across the land. "There have been whispers," Trumpkin said, his brow furrowed. "Whispers of something ancient, something that has been buried beneath Narnia for centuries. The creatures have been hearing voices, voices that speak of power and destruction, of a force that is rising from deep within the earth." Susan listened intently, her heart growing heavier with each word. "What kind of force?" Trumpkin shook his head. "We don't know, but the land itself is reacting. The trees, the rivers, even the mountains, they all seem to be shifting. as if the very foundation of Narnia is being disturbed. Susan's mind raced. This wasn't like any threat they had faced before. This wasn't an enemy they could fight with swords and arrows. This was something deeper, something connected to the very heart of Narnia itself. "Why now?" Susan asked, her voice quiet. "Why is this happening after all these years?" Trumpkin hesitated, his gaze flickering toward the fire. "Some believe it has something to do with you." Susan's heart skipped a beat. "Me?" Trumpkin nodded slowly. "There are those who say that Narnia has been waiting for your return, that the land has sensed your absence, and now that you've come back, the balance has shifted. But whether your return is the cause or the solution, we do not know." Susan felt a lump form in her throat. She had come back to Narnia seeking redemption, but now it seemed that her return was tied to something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. She stood, her mind racing. "We need to find out what's causing this," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. "We need to go to the source." Trumpkin nodded, his expression grim. "There is a place there, deep in the forests of Narnia. A place where the earth is dead to speak. If there are answers to be found, they will be there." Susan's heart quickened. She knew that this journey would not be easy, but she also knew that she could not turn away. Narnia needed her, and for the first time in a long while, she felt the stirrings of the queen she had once been. "Then we leave at first light," Susan said, her voice firm. The next morning, Susan, Trumpkin, and a small group of loyal Narnians set out into the forest, their destination a place few had ever ventured. An ancient grove hidden deep within the heart of Narnia, where it was said that the earth itself held the secrets of the land. As they walked, Susan couldn't help but feel the weight of her doubts pressing down on her. She had always been practical, grounded in the world of logic and reason. But now, here in Narnia once again, she was being asked to confront forces that defied explanation. Could she truly face this ancient darkness? And more importantly, could she find redemption for the choices she had made? The journey was long and difficult, the forest growing darker and more twisted the farther they ventured. The trees seemed to whisper, their branches reaching out like fingers as if the very land was watching them. Susan kept her gaze forward, her mind focused on the task ahead. But the doubts lingered, gnawing at her. She had turned her back on Narnia once before. What if she wasn't strong enough to face this? As the day stretched on, the group finally reached the edge of the ancient grove. It was a strange, eerie place. The trees taller and darker than any Susan had ever seen. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to pulse with a faint rhythmic beat, as if the earth itself was alive. This is it, Trumpkin said quietly. The heart of Narnia. Susan stepped forward, her breath catching in her throat. She could feel it, the presence of something ancient, something powerful. It was as if the very ground was speaking to her, calling her name. Without hesitation, she knelt, pressing her hand to the earth. The moment her fingers touched the soil, a wave of energy surged through her, filling her with a deep, resonant hum. It was as if the land was reaching out to her, connecting with her in a way she had never experienced before. She closed her eyes, letting the feeling wash over her. And then, in the stillness, she heard it, a voice, deep and ancient, speaking from the depths of the earth. "Queen Susan," the voice whispered, "you have returned. Narnia has waited for you." Susan's heart pounded in her chest. "What is happening to Narnia?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why is the land in danger?" The voice rumbled like distant thunder. An ancient darkness stirs beneath the surface. A power long forgotten, buried deep within the earth. It seeks to rise, to consume the light of Narnia. Susan's breath caught in her throat. How do we stop it? The voice was quiet for a moment, as if considering her question. The darkness is tied to the land, to the very heart of Narnia itself. It cannot be destroyed by force. It can only be faced with light, with the strength of those who have ruled this land with love and courage. Susan's heart ached with the weight of the words. She had once been Queen Susan the Gentle, a ruler who had led with kindness and grace. But she had lost her way, turned her back on the magic of Narnia. Could she truly find the strength within herself to face this darkness? The voice seemed to sense her doubt. "You are stronger than you know, Queen Susan. Narnia has not forgotten you. The light of this land still burns within you." Susan swallowed hard, her heart filled with a mixture of fear and determination. She had been given a second chance, a chance to redeem herself, to protect the land she had once loved so dearly. "I will do whatever it takes," she whispered. "I will not let Narnia fall." The journey back to Cair Paravel was one of quiet reflection for Susan. She had learned much from the ancient grove, but now she faced the greatest challenge of all, confronting the darkness that threatened Narnia. As they approached the castle, the air seemed to grow heavier, the sky darkening as if in anticipation of the coming storm. The creatures of Narnia had gathered at the gates, their faces filled with fear and uncertainty. They looked to Susan, their queen, for guidance. Susan stood tall, her heart steady. She had faced many battles in her time as queen, but this one was different. This battle was not just for Narnia. It was for her own soul, for her own redemption. She stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "The darkness that stirs beneath Narnia is ancient and powerful, but it is not invincible. We will face it with the light of our hearts, with the courage and love that has always guided us. The creatures nodded, their hope rekindled by her words. And so, as the darkness began to rise from beneath the earth, Susan led her people in a final stand. The ground trembled and the shadows grew, but Susan stood firm, her heart filled with the light of Narnia. In that moment, she realized that the true power of Narnia was not in its magic or its battles. It was in the love and courage of its people. And as she faced the darkness, Susan felt the weight of her past fall away, replaced by the strength of who she truly was. Queen Susan, the gentle, ruler of Narnia, protector of its light. The battle was long, but in the end, the light of Narnia prevailed. The darkness was pushed back, buried once more beneath the earth. And as the first rays of dawn broke through the clouds, Susan knew that she had finally found her redemption. Narnia was at peace once more, and so was she. The sun rose high over Caer Paravel, casting a warm, golden light over the land. Susan stood on the balcony of the castle, her heart filled with a deep sense of peace. The weight of her past had lifted, and she felt lighter, freer than she had in years. She had returned to Narnia not just to face an ancient evil, but to find herself again. And in doing so, she had discovered that the light of Narnia, the light of her own heart, had never truly left her. As she looked out over the land she had once ruled, Susan smiled. She was no longer the young queen who had doubted herself, who had turned away from the magic of Narnia. She was stronger now, wiser, and filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Narnia had given her a second chance, and she had taken it. And as the wind whispered through the trees, Susan knew that she was finally home.